You are staying with us. We now move over to the United States, where tensions escalate in California after President Donald Trump deploys 2,000 National Guard troops to Los Angeles, overriding State Governor Gavin Newsom's objections. The move comes after days of intense protests against federal immigration raids that saw tear gas, flashbangs and arrests in multiple locations, including Paramount and Compton. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has put Marines at Camp Pendleton on high alert, warning of a possible deployment if violence continues. Governor Newsom called the move inflammatory, saying California has sufficient law enforcement to maintain order. Amid the chaos, ICE claimed it arrested over 100 immigrants, including suspected gang members, while immigrant advocates and lawmakers condemned the crackdown. Protesters and rights groups say the federal presence is escalating and not easing the unrest in Los Angeles. This is what Angelica Salas from the Coalition of Humane Immigrant Rights had to say.
People were being arrested and continue to be arrested right here in the courtroom, where they were seeking justice and they were seeking their process. What I also want you to know is that none of the operations that we have reported on had any warrants with people's names on it, with the name of the businesses. They were random sweeps, and they were picking up our community in random sweeps. They were racially profiling our community. So I want you to know, and I want this president to know, and I want every elected official in this country to know, being brown, being black, being Asian, looking like an immigrant does not make you criminal.
We're once again joined by Spencer Critchley to discuss this in further detail. Spencer, how concerning is it that President Trump overrode Governor Gavin Newsom's objections to deploy federal troops? Does this set a dangerous precedent?
Oh, it absolutely does. And people who don't live in the United States might need a little extra information to understand just why this is so serious. The last time this was done was in 1965 by President Lyndon Johnson, when I believe it was the state of Alabama refused to protect the civil rights of black Americans. It's an extraordinary seizure of state power by the federal government that's only to be used, according to the law, in the event of a rebellion against the government of the United States of America, is essentially what needs to be happening. In other words, a complete breakdown of civic order or an attack on the government of the United States. Furthermore, the right of peaceful protest in the United States is sacred, and yet Donald Trump finds it offensive to his authoritarian instincts. During his first administration, you may remember there was an entirely peaceful protest in front of the White House, and Trump was asking General Mark Milley, one of his most senior military leaders, why the troops, why U.S. troops couldn't shoot at these protesters and if not kill them, do something like try to shoot them in the legs. This is just incredible in the American context. I can tell you, I have personal experience working with police agencies dealing with large-scale protests here in California. And I'm proud of the police agencies I worked with. Notably, the chief of one of them made a point of saying that it was the role of his department to protect the peaceful protesters, not to attack them. If there was violence, of course, the police need to step in and stop the violence, and well-trained American police departments are entirely capable of doing that sort of thing. And they're far better trained to do it than military forces are. And here we have President Trump not only nationalizing the California National Guard, which is guaranteed to escalate the situation and make it far more dangerous, but Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth talking about using active duty federal military troops against American citizens. Now, there has been some violence in these protests, and there should not be such violence, and it is illegal to interfere with law enforcement operations. but these incidents are reportedly scattered, and there is nothing going on that remotely approaches the need for a nationalized National Guard presence, and certainly not the U.S. military.
Spencer, I want to get your brief analysis on the difference between the Trump administration and the previous administrations in regard to ICE's actions. Trump has said that he plans to deploy the biggest deportation operation in US history. How do you think that's going down with the American public? Obviously, California did not vote for Donald Trump, but can I get your thoughts on the actions of these immigration forces in America since Trump took office in January?
Well, it seems clear they're becoming increasingly unpopular, including among people who voted for Donald Trump. A famous case this week was the arrest and deportation of a woman from Hong Kong who, yes, was apparently in the country illegally and had been for something like 20 years, but who was a beloved member of her small town, a town where apparently something like 80% of the population had voted for Donald Trump. But as many of them said, we did not vote for this. Trump, ginned up panic about a supposed invasion of terrorists and drug dealers and human traffickers in the United States, and said that what he was going to do was go after the most dangerous criminals who had come into the country illegally. And many people who believed him understandably thought that sounded like a good idea. But of course, that's not what he's doing. We've seen that he's been deporting people to this gulag-style prison in El Salvador, the great majority of whom are apparently guilty of no crime at all. And this is typical of most of the people who are being rounded up in these raids. These raids in Los Angeles are targeting people looking for work in front of a hardware store, which is a common sight in California, is to see immigrants standing in front of these large hardware stores hoping to find some work for the day, working on construction sites and this sort of thing. And also reportedly targeting meatpacking plants and other places that tend to employ illegal immigrants. Again, yes, these people are here illegally, but they're there because they're needed, and they were essentially welcomed in, and they are working. These are not criminals. And so as more and more Americans realize what's actually going on here, more and more of them reject it.
Spencer Critchley, thank you very much for joining us. Pleasure having your insight on the program. We stay in the United